I think the best way to start is to have a goal. Okay, so you have the intent, now you have a goal, and the goal should be, what are you going to do every day to make this happen? And maybe everybody it's different, but maybe you come up with maybe 3 to 5 new people every day. We've heard this, from a lot of people, that you try to make new introductions to people. And that could be you're in Starbucks and there's someone sitting next to you and they're working just like you are, and you just lean over and introduce yourself, right? So there are lots of ways to do that, but authenticity, like you said, I think is really important. But just being out there, I mean, there are just so many ways. One thing I've learned is that in order to do this the right way and to truly be authentic, you need to know what interests you. Okay, so if I am interested in a certain sport and I end up attending groups for a different sport that doesn't interest me, right? That's not being authentic. It doesn't work. So finding your hobbies, finding what interests you, and then joining groups accordingly.
Welcome back to the Ask Me How We Know podcast. I am so excited. This has been on the recording schedule for a very long time. And today I am joined by Stefan. And oh my gosh, we met over on LinkedIn. I love the content you're producing and creating and the insights that you're offering on so many different levels with the business world, with mindset, with everything. It's like, what don't you do? So I'll stop talking and raving and say, hey, welcome to the show, Stefan.
Well, thank you, Julie. Thanks for having, like you mentioned, this is something we've been working on for quite some time. So I'm happy we could finally have this conversation. So thank you.
Such a celebratory moment.
Absolutely.
Well, Stefan, I decided a long time ago I would never introduce my guests because I didn't want to read off of a page. And then I actually was like the anti-introducer where I'm like, no, I'm just not doing any introductions. Like we're going to jump into conversation. And then I evolved once again and realized that sometimes people don't have the same context that I have for my guests. And so maybe I should, offer some level of introduction. And so aside from you and I being connected via social media and, just being able to get to know each other that way, would you go ahead and just tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you're up to?
Sure. Well, thank you for allowing me to do that. I'll give you kind of the personal and the professional side of me. So I'm Stefan Contorno. From a personal side, I'm married to a wonderful woman of many years, and we have 2, I guess, more getting close to adult type of children. Not quite there yet. We have a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old. So blessed to be a father and a husband. On a professional side, so I am a senior vice president and partner of a team called Touchstone Wealth Partners. We're in the wealth management business. Basically, what we do is our job is to make sure that people don't do stupid things with their money, right? So we give financial advice. Now, I'm with UBS Wealth Management. UBS is the largest global wealth management firm in the world. And our team is very fortunate to be one of the top in our firm, as well as just in the industry in general. We're a little unique right now. I'm sitting here in the beautiful Southwest Florida, right in the Naples, Fort Myers area. I'm not originally from here, but we do have an office down here. We have an office in Toledo, Ohio, as well as an office in New York as well, all through the Touchstone team. So that's kind of the quick version of us.
That's amazing. And you're so succinct and on point. I'm like, wow, that's like top notch. But if you are listening to this, you are not seeing what everyone's seeing over on the YouTube channel. And that is, Stefan, you've got a great tan going on. Of
Well,
course, you're in Florida.
That is a big, I'm not in Canada, right? I mean, that's
Right.
a big benefit. So I am from New York originally, but yeah, the tan is just part of the way of life here. I'll tell you, it's summertime now. It's pretty warm here, but thank you.
But it's pretty nice. Now, you and I have something in common, and that is that we have moved. We've made very big moves in our life, and that you moved. I mean, you kind of dropped everything and moved, and I really would like to hear the story about that. I'm big into people taking leaps on themselves, like bets on themselves, and kind of those dares to level up, to live outside the comfort zone. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is living outside your comfort zone. Making a move, I mean, just from one city to another is a big move. For me, it was a little bit longer. Maybe I was a little crazy at the time, but going back to about 2007, 2008, my mom is a semi-snowbird down here in Florida, and my wife and I would come down periodically to visit and just fell in love with the area. I know you're from California, so for me, I always wanted to live in a warm climate, have a nice tan, right?
I get it. I totally get this.
You totally do. You did the opposite. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But for me, it was always about maybe moving to maybe Southern California or Florida. So Florida ended up being the happy medium. It was the same time zone. You know, I was born and raised in New York. So born in Brooklyn, grew up in Staten Island, New York, went to college in Manhattan. So for all intents and purposes, a city guy, right? So it was a little bit of a leap of faith. So my wife and I, after some convincing on my end, agreed that we would make a move. And it was a big move. Again, it was 1,200 miles. I moved down to a place that I really did not know anybody. My mom was only coming down here about maybe 1 or 2 weeks a year. So I was already in practice. So I was already a financial advisor at that time for a number of years. And just a leap of faith. We said, you know what? Life is too short. I can either make the move when I retire, like my clients do, and you know, who knows what that's going to look like for me one day, or I could do it when I'm a little bit more on the younger side and take the chance. At the time, our kids were 6 and 3. It was perfect timing because the oldest was going to start first grade, and you'll appreciate this. So this was during 2008. We all remember what 2008 was like from an economic point of view.
Did something happen in 2008?
I think I heard something happen. Yeah, I don't recall what it was exactly, but yeah, something pretty big, right? So the economy was obviously, it was a very difficult time to say the least. So this was February of 2008. And what we did was I told my wife, I said, I'm a big believer in things that happen if they're meant to be, right? So let's put the house for sale in February of 2008. If by the end of the year it doesn't sell, then you know what? We give up on the dream and we worry about doing this maybe down the road in our lifetime. So long story short, 14 days later, our house sells.
14 days.
14 days. 14 days. So the house sold. So I guess it was meant to be. And at that point, not only did I have clients in the entire Northeast region, I had to let them know what we were looking to do. And we had to find a home at the same time. So it was certainly a leap of faith, one that I absolutely am thrilled that we did. But I think part of life, part of being an entrepreneur and just in general is sometimes taking some risks, but calculated risks.
Calculated risks are absolutely important, but you know, if you never bet on yourself, if you don't take those leaps, you just always left wondering. And part of our journey, like as people, our personal evolution requires us to take those risks, or we just become stagnant.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I'm a big believer in following lots of people on social media. I read a lot. If you look at any of the really successful people, they'll always tell you that sometimes it's really good to get out of your comfort zone. And sometimes, and that's nothing against people who live in, you know, where they grew up. I mean, that's a wonderful thing because you have family and friends. But sometimes it's good to get out of that comfort zone and go somewhere to a new place that you don't necessarily know anybody, because what it does is it forces you to get to know people, make friends, make business acquaintances, do whatever you have to do to establish a good life wherever you end up going.
That, and I will add to that, it also really gives you a lot of empathy towards people who are making transitions in life. And it really brings you closer to that genesis moment of like, what happens when you make transitions and how to support people around you. So similar to you, you didn't ask the question, but I'll ask.
I was just about to. So yeah, how do you go from California to Idaho? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, and our first move was in a very similar way. We actually went from California to Denver, Colorado. And my husband and I were newlyweds, and we said, you know what? We don't have any kids right now. We don't have any of these things encumbering us. Now is this great time. We can go move, we're nimble, and if it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, we'll figure it out, but we won't ever know. And we always had that question in our head. And so we did. We made that move over to Denver, Colorado. And you were talking about making that, you're trying to establish your new relationships and trying to make friends. And Denver is a great melting pot, and everybody is very quick to be, to make friends and to be kind. Now, to have long-lasting friendships is difficult because people are transient. All the young entrepreneurs move to Denver, they start their careers, and then they get transferred out, like 3 years later. So you're like, oh, we'll be friends for 3 years.
And then we'll find new friends, right?
And then we'll find new friends. Yeah. So our strategy, and then when we moved to went back to California, ended up in North Idaho. one of those wild stories where God just literally moved our family in 3 months' time. It wasn't on our radar to move. We didn't have a plan. We'd never been to this location or this place, never heard of it. So it's just it's a very wild story. But every time we have moved, so 2 very long distance moves, we kind of have this strategy of plan for us. We go, we find a church. That's like our number one thing. We're like, you know what? Well, if we don't have real family, we want to have our faith family. So we go, we find a church so that we can actually start establishing those relationships. And then from there, we just kind of branch out and always getting to know neighbors, going to different, meetups, things like that. So what is your strategy of really developing and cultivating meaningful relationships as you moved?
Well, yeah. So for me, a lot of it was business related, of course. So again, I was in practice in the Northeast, came down here, didn't know anybody. So the idea was, how do I build a practice down here where I live? And it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, in our industry and a lot of entrepreneurial industries, it's very difficult to make it to begin with. So, so I was very fortunate. I had some very long-term, really wonderful people that I work with as far as clients in the Northeast. But here I am in a new place trying to figure out, how do I meet new people? So for me, there was an approach that I used. I said, why don't I kind of treat this as an opportunity to almost be the mayor of where I am, right? Here I am, this new person, I have nothing to lose. And my job is to go out and meet as many people as I can, make friends, make business acquaintances, just get to know people in general. And what's the simplest way to do that? I said, well, you mentioned the church, which is obviously an outstanding way to do that. But for me, a lot of it was a simple tactic. All I did was meet people for a cup of coffee, right? I said, there are lots of ways you can do it, but if I just, reached out and said, Julie, listen, I'm new to the area. I'm building my practice down here in Southwest Florida. I've heard great things about you. I'd love the opportunity to meet you for a cup of coffee, learn a little bit more about what you do and your life, and tell you a little bit about myself. And I made a goal where I would try to do this at least 2 times a day. So I ended up camping out quite a bit at Starbucks.
You were highly caffeinated.
Highly caffeinated. Well, the secret is one is coffee, and then I switched to water, but that's a whole other conversation. That's way too much caffeine. So I would do that, and I started doing 2, 3, and even 4 times a day that I would meet with people. So that was kind of my way to get to know people, because in any business or just in life, it's all about kind of that chemistry you have with people. And for me, it was about finding out who I could have that chemistry with. Now, sometimes you meet with people and they're great people, but they're just, you may not click for whatever reason.
You
have
fall
nothing
flat.
in common.
It's like, great person, but this isn't going to go anywhere.
It happens. It happens. And even though I'm married, it was like speed dating to some degree, right? From a different perspective, but you're
different
exactly
type of
right.
relationship, but it is, it's all relationships, and good business is based on strong relationships.
100%. So that is what I did. So I made that a practice for a while. And again, it was kind of being the mayor. I went to Chamber of Commerce events and I'd shake people's hands and I get to meet people. And I did this really quickly where I focused so much on meeting new people that pretty quickly I knew a lot of people. Now, from a business point of view for me, and a lot of what we do is we meet with and deal with clients, CPAs and attorneys and real estate agents. So it was about getting to know the right people in the community. And more importantly, and this is always a business lesson, right? Seeing what I can do to help them. Okay. How can I help them in their business and help our clients find the right people? Because when you do that, you do a good enough job, we all know it kind of comes back to you.
Yep. Yeah. Isn't that interesting? I was speaking with someone yesterday and I said, listen, life isn't about necessarily a one-to-one rate like exchange. So it's not like, you have a transaction at the grocery store, you give them dollars for, a product and the exchange is over. Sometimes you might give somebody time and in return, they give you a connection. You give somebody, you buy somebody's product, but in turn, now, you have an introduction. Like it's not a one-to-one, but it always comes back around to bless you in some capacity.
It really does. And, and again, every business is different, but a lot of times people in, say, my position look for referrals from others, right? We're just kind of waiting to get something in. That's very difficult to do. And the people that you're trying to work with and build a relationship with, they know that. So I have always taken the opposite approach. I like to give, right? So if I can give referrals to the right people, and of course we vet the right people and make sure that they're the right ones to refer to. But once we have that relationship and I could do something like that, in time it comes back. And I've always been a big believer in that. And that's how we built our practice.
Yeah, that is exactly. I'm with you on that. Now, This is interesting. Now I live in this rural community. So in Denver, it was easy to make relationships. Literally, we met another couple, when we were like shopping one day. And we ended up and go get tacos for dinner that night type thing. Okay.
Oh, that's terrific.
That's just how
I love that.
I will add this, and I think that you would have the same situation that I do. My daughter told me just a few days ago, she's 10. She's like, hey, Mom, don't get to talking to anybody that you know or don't know while we're out doing this job.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, then you're going to end up having tacos with them later on, and she doesn't want to do that. So
exactly. But interesting, there are people like me where we've moved to different locations, and maybe like for me with real estate investing, I don't have an infrastructure here in my local community. And to be part of those requires like a 2.5-hour drive. And so So I've had to learn how to build out a network within my industry in a completely different way. So I'm wondering what advice you would give to people as they are looking to connect and expand their network. You are a master networker on social media. So I know how to do this really well. What are some of the strategies that you use? Because what I admire is, and I do want to put this out there, is that authenticity. Anyone who knows me well knows that I value genuineness. I value authenticity. And so you are genuine and authentic, and that translates across the screen, and that creates, connections that are meaningful. So what's the secret?
Thank you. Well, being authentic is important. I mean, listen, we need to be ourselves. I mean, you can follow certain people and try to emulate what successful people do. But at the end of the day, you could only do that so long you revert back to who you truly are. And I think that's important. So how do you do that? I mean, there are lots of ways to build those type of relationships. First, you need to know what your intent is, right? I mean, you're looking to just make friends, that may be one of the goals that people have. And there are certain ways to do that, or you're looking to build more business relationships. So for me, it was a little bit of both. It was probably more tilted towards the business relationship part, but I think the best way to start is to have a goal. Okay, so you have the intent, now you have a goal, and the goal should be, what are you going to do every day to make this happen? And maybe everybody, it's different, but maybe you come up with maybe 3 to 5 new people every day. We've heard this, from a lot of people, that you try to make new introductions to people. And that could be you're in Starbucks and there's someone sitting next to you and they're working just like you are, and you just lean over and introduce yourself, right? So there are lots of ways to do that, but authenticity, like you said, I think is really important. But just being out there, I mean, there are just so many ways. One thing I've learned is that in order to do this the right way and to truly be authentic, you need to know what interests you. Okay, so if I am interested in a certain sport and I end up attending groups for a different sport that doesn't interest me, right? That's not being authentic. It doesn't work. So finding your hobbies, finding what interests you, and then joining groups accordingly. And that was something I did as well when I moved down here, was I joined every group imaginable. And
what kind of groups are you doing? The bocce ball group? Are you doing long golf?
I've done it all. I've started my own groups. I'll tell you about that as well. But here's the thing. So I joined certain groups where, the normal groups where you get together, there's one person from every profession and everybody tries to refer to each other. There are various groups like that. I play a lot of tennis, so I'm part of tennis groups. Now I do that socially. I don't do that for business, okay? But we've made a lot of friends that way. And that was a big thing for me because it allowed me to expand the people that we're friends with. And there are a lot of great people. So now they may know someone maybe who can use my services. That's different. But joining that, I joined fishing groups. I went to a lot of chamber events. So I did a lot of that. And then what I did was I started kind of filtering. And I tell a lot of people this. So I do a lot of mentoring with the local university here with students. And I'll just meet them kind of off the cuff, right, to kind of discuss what I do and give them advice. And I always tell them that make sure that you're participating in things that interest you. Now, if you join a certain group or you can't find a group for something that interests you, well, start your own, right? I'm a big believer, nobody's willing to just hand you something. If you want something bad enough, you have to go out and get it. So what I did was I took some of these groups and I kind of put on paper what I like about them and what I dislike about them. And I tweaked it a little bit. And then I was able to start my own groups. I did that with a lot of networking groups as well, right? And it gave me a reason to reach out to people to offer them an opportunity to be part of the group. So I was really helping them, but ultimately is helping me build a network as well.
This is super duper powerful. I want to emphasize this, like asterisks, neon lights, unicorns, confetti, like just everybody take note of this practice. So during the pandemic, I was trying to network and get connected. There were things that I wanted to grow in. And so I would just organize these, not regular meetups, but it was just on a topic specific meetups. And I started to get this reputation of, oh, well, what's next month's meetup? Well, I'm like, I don't have a monthly meetup. I have meetups, and they were always not to be self-centered or something, but speaking to authenticity, it's like, well, I know I need to learn more about social media, best practices and things like that. What if I get these experts, they can come speak on it. Let's make it worth their time and invite a whole bunch of people to the conversation. And now you've created something, and you can do that on whatever topic you want. There's so many different ways to extrapolate this. So if you're listening right now and you're trying to expand your network or create more meaningful relationships, figure out what you want to learn or what you need, and then just bring the people to it.
Well, and I love that, because you did that perfectly, because you just explained exactly what I was saying, which is you built your network, but you did it by helping other people build theirs, right?
Yeah.
And that's the key. So I think that's absolutely brilliant that you did that. It's terrific.
Yeah, it really worked well. I cannot believe how it impacted my life and my business. And then at the end of the year, I ended up having a book club. I didn't anticipate having an ongoing book club. Honestly, I needed outside accountability. And hey, I want to put these practices into my life for 2021. I'm going to read this book. Who else wants to do this journey? Anybody else want to do this journey with me? Then we can do this together. And you're helping other people, they're helping you, and it works out really well. You create meaningful relationships. But now we're on book number 6, because they said.
I love that, by the way, because you're thinking big, right? And I think a lot of people think small. And I think that's part of and there's nothing wrong with that, but I think that's it. When you're trying to grow a business, thinking big is important. So when I hear you say those type of things, I think, how can you continue to expand that even more? And those are the things that you're doing. So again, very smart.
Very, very exciting. I love that you started all those groups, though. I mean, it's so smart to take like the pick of the litter and then to create like this magic meeting.
Yeah. And again, that's where, and again, not to name specific organizations, but those groups that do meet, where you meet with others and try to refer to each other, there are always going to be pros and cons. I mean, those are really well-developed type of programs. But there can be certain things that you don't like about it. Maybe, for instance, meeting once a week is just a little too much for you, but you think every other week is appropriate, right? If you start your own group, you have a little more control over something like that. So that was what I was trying to do, was to find what I thought for me were the pluses and the minuses and kind of build on that.
Okay, I have to ask you this question, because we're both like organizers, and I mean we are so in line on this whole, just if it's not out there, just create it. So
Absolutely.
do you create? I have this thing where I always create what I call gracious exits for people. It's like when you organize a group, is it just going to be ongoing when you organize one, Stefan? Like, is it ongoing forever, or do you have this is how long the duration? We do this 6 months, we do this a year. How do you organize it?
Yeah, I've always made it ongoing, because you just don't know where it's going to go. So I didn't really have that gracious exit, so to speak. But I think the intent for me was to build it and have it go as long as I can. Now, what happens usually is it takes on its own life, I think, at some point.
Yes.
You may find people come and go that participate. You may find that there's a group you gravitate more towards than others. And then I think what ends up happening in some regards, and these are just small examples, but in some regards, you end up forming groups within the group, and then it kind of goes its own direction. That has been a little bit of my experience like that. I don't do as many of those kind of groups, to be honest with you. I mean, I think what I do now is evolved to some degree.
Yeah.
I think the relationship has evolved in what I do. So I don't do as many of those type of things, but if I go back a little bit, that's kind of where it went. It gravitated and really took on its own life. And then you end up with like a really close-knit group of people that you have a lot in common with. And honestly, I think it's even more powerful at that point.
I think it is more powerful to have a few, strong allies and ambassadors, advocates, whatever you want to call them, than it is to have this whole tribe and huge group of people where you're just another person that they're, loosely acquainted with.
Absolutely. And then you find yourself like we are now, still in a pandemic, right? And it's not as easy to go out there. So it's really important have that infrastructure in place before. Now, of course, with the way the world is now, you have to think out of the box. I mean, there are other things you could do, right? But it's always an interesting thing to try to think and be creative about how can you build your network. I enjoy that.
Okay, so somebody's listening to this and they say, wow, Stefan, Julie, you guys are amazing. I'm so happy for you, extroverts who can carry on conversations that are amazing. I'm not like that. I'm not outgoing and I'm not comfortable doing this. Like, how would you encourage someone like that?
I love that question. I think if I'm completely honest with you, myself and your audience, I'm probably not fully an extrovert. I've wondered sometimes, and a lot of what we do is kind of, evaluating ourselves, but I don't think I'm a natural extrovert. Okay. I don't know if I'd say I'm a full introvert either. I'm probably somewhere in between. I think it's important to be able to kind of turn on and off when you need to. One of the things I've learned is you need to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. And you really need to understand yourself. So if you are if someone listening is a little bit more of an introvert, then the idea of going up on stage and speaking in front of a group of people probably is not the best thing for them, right? or having a group gather around them at a cocktail party and they're the ones telling the story. Probably not the best way to do it. For them, they may be much better being one-on-one. Okay, so know what your capabilities are. So if someone's an introvert listening right now and says, I just don't feel comfortable doing that, again, it's authenticity. Don't be who you're not. Everyone will realize that if you try to do that. Instead, focus on what you're comfortable with. Okay, I'll give you a great example. Okay, when you speak, now I do a lot of speaking engagements, and I don't think that was something that early on in my life I thought I'd do. But if you want to do certain things in life, sometimes you need to get it back out of that comfort zone, and you do.
Yep.
But for some people, they may not be comfortable being on stage and speaking in front of people, but maybe they find themselves a little more comfortable, maybe at a board meeting type of style, sitting down and speaking to somebody. That may just make them feel a little bit better and a little less pressure on them. So I think if you really evaluate who you are, and like I said, if you're a one-on-one person, then own that. That is you.
That's your stage. It can be a small stage. It doesn't have to be a big stage.
That's exactly right. I've never been the person that goes to a cocktail party and everyone's gathered around listening to what I have to say, and I take a short story and make it really long and it's animated. It's just not me, right? That's just not me. And I'm the one who listens and nods my head as someone does that. And that's all okay. So everybody's a little bit different. So I think know who you are, know what you're good at. Don't be afraid to step out a little bit out of that comfort zone, but again, own it.
I love that. And I will say, is it sometimes, where was I going with that in my mind? I just kind of had one of those little squirrel moments. But
it happens.
It does happen. There's a lot of, this is sparking so many great ideas. One thing that I have really conditioned myself to is it's not about me. So when I launched a podcast and started doing just different speaking and things like that, I realized it's not about me. It's about the message. I'm just a messenger. Yeah. And I literally, in my mind, go ahead and laugh at this. This is hilarious. Permission granted. I picture a medieval times, messenger, almost like a peasant. I'm just a messenger. That's all it is. It's not about me. Nobody cares about me. It's like, I want to deliver this message so that it can empower somebody's life. And so sometimes when you remind yourself, what's more important? Is my ego more important? Is how I look more important? Is that, or do you really want people to grow and learn and understand this information?
Yeah.
And separating the two is powerful.
I think it's a great point. And everybody likes to talk about themselves, right? That's always the thing. But I'm in a business, listen, we give financial advice. So for me, it's not about me doing all the speaking. This is different. It's a one-on-one type of discussion. But when I meet with clients, it's not about me doing all the talking. I need to not only let the client express what they're trying to achieve and what they want, and what's important to them, but I need to carefully listen. I can hear it, but I need to listen to that. And I think that's also very important. That's back to turning on and turning off when it's appropriate. And in those instances, I think that's the way you want to treat the situation.
Yeah. And being able to listen to people well, it's exhausting. Let's just be real.
Sure.
Listen,
I'm a guy and a husband, and we're generally known as not being very good listeners, right? As having a husband, you can understand that, but it's very important to listen. So I think a lot of people, and I find that in my industry, a lot of people who do what I do like to speak and do most of the talking. And ultimately, that's probably not the best thing to do. And I will even add how important it is. So for us, we deal with a lot of, obviously we have clients who are single and widowed, but we also have couples who are clients. It is so important to listen to both parts of the couple, right?
Yes.
And I think a lot of people make mistakes when it comes to that. I mean, you're a female. I mean, if I were meeting with you and your husband, and all I did was speak with your husband, that's a really bad message. That's an old school message. One that it's not about that. I mean, chances are statistically, you're going to outlive your husband, right? I mean, that's just the way it goes. So for me, it's extremely important to listen carefully.
I love that. Okay, I have to transition our conversation a little bit, and we weren't intending to talk, to go down this path, but I think it's going to be, this is like a perfect moment and very interesting. I'm so curious. When we're talking about wealth management, where we're talking about listening, and I'll add into this, like looking at your finances, understanding what's going on, there are some really huge mistakes that people, too many people are making with their wealth management, and it puts their family in a compromised position. So a lot of people are well-intended and they're going to like, oh, I'm going to leave this inheritance, to my kids. And, oh, well, they pass away and now the government just took like 60% of it. So
a lot of it. Yeah.
So anyway, what can we just spend a few minutes and talk maybe about some of those traps that people in general fall into with wealth management?
Sure. I'll tell you the biggest one I find is that they're not planning properly. And what I mean by that is more financial planning. I meet with a lot of people who kind of take advantage of our second opinion service, which is basically someone comes in, we just have what we call a discovery meeting. We just have a frank conversation about where they are, what's important to them, what they're looking to achieve, what they like about where they are, currently, and who they're working with, and what they don't like about it. Okay. Well, planning is really important. So our team, Touchstone, is extremely focused on financial planning. And let me explain what I mean by financial planning.
Yeah, and wealth management also, because some people aren't familiar with those terms.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there are people that we meet with that all they're focused on is the investment management part. Basically, how are they going to invest in stocks and bonds? How do they make as much money as they possibly can? And at the end of the day, we all want to make as much money as we possibly can. That's a wonderful thing. But how do you invest your money if you have absolutely no idea what you're trying to achieve? Okay. So investment management is just trying to invest in the markets and do as well as you can. Wealth management incorporates everything. So wealth management incorporates financial planning. Of course, it involves investment management because that's still really important. It involves banking. It involves estate planning. Wealth management incorporates everything. So when we meet with new potential clients, what we do is we do a financial plan for them. And quite simply, this is how it works, Julie, is we take an inventory, both sides of the balance sheet, okay? We take a look at all of their assets, everything that they own, whether they're stock investments or investment properties, whatever it may be. We then take a look at the liability side. We take a look at what they owe. I think a lot of people don't spend enough time on that side of the balance sheet in our business, and I think that's also important. So now we have an inventory of everything that you own and owe. At that point, we'll ask you, what are you trying to achieve, right? What is the ultimate goal? Maybe you want to retire at a certain age. Maybe you want to live off a certain amount of money every month. And you say, in order for me to retire at 62, I need to live on whatever the dollar amount is. Maybe you're like us and you're crazy enough and you say, I'm going to move one day and I want to downsize or upsize or whatever from one home in one state to another, or I just want to have a second home. Okay. We have clients who like to buy cars every 2 years. I mean, everybody spends their money. That's one thing I've learned, by the way. Everybody views money differently and everybody spends their money differently. Okay. So we take account all of those things that clients are looking to achieve. And we do something that I think is unique. We actually work backwards. We determine this is what you want to achieve. How can we construct your portfolio so that you can achieve these things that are important to you with the least amount of risk possible? I think at the end of the day, if we could all tell each other, you could do all the things that are important to you and you could put your head on your pillow at night and know that everything's going to be okay. Of course, there's volatility in the markets, but that it's been stress tested enough that you feel comfortable to know that the outcome is going to be everything that you and your family desire. That is ultimately what it is. That's what wealth management is. That's what financial planning is. That's kind of what we're all about.
I love it. I believe in it. It took us far too long because that concept of wealth management, a lot of people just, they say, oh, well, that's for family offices. That's for people that are making multi-millions of dollars, that they like, they're
Yeah.
sneezing on $100 bills, like that's the concept that a lot of people hear when they hear wealth management. And actually, it's for everybody who wants to really establish a solid protection and plan for their lifestyle and for their future. So
it really is. And you just bring up an interesting point, because for people to not think it's for them, I think is a crucial mistake. Now,
yes.
everybody, we see all different degrees of wealth. I mean, our clients range from people who have made enough money that they don't need to worry anymore, to those who are really just starting out and trying to accumulate wealth. But what happens is, and I mentioned financial planning pretty extensively, there's really kind of two versions of financial planning, right? There's the first part, which goes up to a certain net worth, right? Of those who have done a really good job saving money, but they want the financial to basically the financial plan to tell them, what can I do, right? Can I move? Can I retire? Then you hit a certain net worth where it's not about what can I do. You can do whatever you want, but it's about how do I do it effectively. And that's where more advanced estate planning comes in. It gets a lot more detailed from that point. But I illustrate that because no matter where you are in that point, it's important to have a plan. I mean, look at people like Jeff Bezos and Larry Ellison. I mean, they have more money than any of us could ever imagine, yet they still do planning. Because for them, it's just a different type of planning, right? But everybody should do some form of planning. And I would say that's probably the biggest mistake that I see people make, is not planning appropriately.
And not being someone in your shoes who lives and breathes this every single day, but I speak with, potential investors and people that are, starting to, come out of their cocoon and like, oh, there's this other world. And what you notice is that there's this, generally speaking, gross generalization, I'm acknowledging that right now, is that you have this group of people that just think, I'm going to save, and I'm going to save myself to, my future. And those same people could also be this other group of people where I'm going to save, but I'm going to be smart and I'm going to hire a wealth manager so that have a plan in place, and they're making the same amount of money. You could have the exact same profile, if you will. And one person is using a wealth management company and one person is not, and they're going to end up in very different places.
No doubt about that. And when you mention saving, and I think that's important, especially because we're in an environment right now where we keep hearing that term inflation, right?
Right.
Inflation keeps coming up every time you turn on the news, right? And it's going to continue for a while. Saving, of course, is important. And you want to have a certain amount of money established on the side so that if things happen and you have emergencies, you have funds available. But you also, whether it's doing what you do through real estate or what we do through equity markets, you want to make sure that your money is keeping up with inflation. Extremely important. And that is another mistake I see a lot of people make, is that they sit on too much cash that's not earning anything, especially these days. They're getting nothing on it. You factor in 2, 3, 4% inflation, and all of a sudden they're actually losing money on an investment that they perceived as being safe.
I thank you so much for saying that aloud, because that is I've said that before. I mean, you are losing money when you just have this cash sitting in the bank and inflation is taking place. You're losing money. So you've got to move that money into something different. It has to be held in a different way.
Absolutely. That's the thing. So people do that because they don't want to lose money. But like you just said, they are anyway. And this is an if, we'll see where inflation goes. But if inflation continues to pick up, that's going to be more and more important for people to make sure that they're at least keeping up with inflation so they can continue to do the things that they want to do. If that went on for a period of time and you look, 10, 20, 30 years from now, when people want to retire, their money's going to be worth a lot less than they thought it would be. And then I don't want to say it's too late, but they'd have a very big problem at that point.
It would be a bit. That's one of my primary concerns. Is it's not just the silver tsunami that's taking place right now with the baby boomers retiring, left and right every single day. It's, for this generation, it's going to be a different type of, struggle potentially. And so I'm not going to just seal the deal, but I'm just saying every generation has a unique struggle that they will have to work through, and working in a smart way, partnering with a wealth manager, is really important.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And you're right. Every generation have different concerns and different needs. And you can see that with the younger generation now. It's a whole different type of lifestyle. And I'll tell you, even with the younger generation, I mean, things like investing in like environmental, social governance type of investments is really important. They want to go green, right? They want to invest in companies that share the same beliefs and values that they believe in. And not that, older clients don't also feel that way, but that was not as much of a focus. So that shifted quite a bit.
That's interesting. Golly, I knew we were going to have an amazing time, Stefan.
I loved it.
It's so much fun. And I could carry on, for another hour easily. But I want to give time to say, hey, is there anything before we wrap up? Is there anything that you think we should touch on, circle back to, or add to our conversation?
Yeah, well, I will tell you, I enjoyed this. I mean, this is just a great conversation. I hope your viewers and listeners get something out of this. The only thing I'll kind of leave with is, I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs who listen to your podcast. Being an entrepreneur is not an easy thing. I mean, I'm sure you can attest to that. It's something, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with working for a company and being an employee, and that's great for a lot of people. But for those who want to be an entrepreneur, definitely it's all about risks. We spoke about risks. It's all about planning. We spoke about planning, and a lot of it is all about mindset. I know you and I have had separate conversations on mindset. What goes on in our minds as an entrepreneur is very different than what other people would ever imagine. I mean, it's something that we carry our business with us all of the time. And being prepared, taking good care of ourselves, having structure in life, all very, very important, because ultimately you want to work really hard, but at some point you want to work really smart. And that is a message I would definitely give for anyone listening, is really just know what you're getting yourself into as an entrepreneur. Take good care of yourself mentally and physically, okay? And always stay focused.
I love that advice. Now, if you are newer to the Ask Me How I Know podcast, go back to November and December of 2020, and I did an entire series every Monday on engineering your habits, getting into your morning routine, and really breaking all of those things down into their little finite parts so that you can construct the life that you want that will serve you super well. So habits are powerful, and mindset
Extremely.
is going to makes or breaks somebody.
I agree with you. I mean, I'm a very regimented person. I have my morning routines. I have my certain things that I do every day. And if I go off course just a little bit, it kind of bothers me sometimes. So I try to stay on course as much as I can.
I'm not as productive. I don't make the strides and the gains that I want. And I don't show up as the best version of myself that I want to be. Just how it goes.
I agree with that. I think it's really, really, really important. I'm going to go back. I listened to quite a few of your podcasts. I do want to hear those that I think that would be important.
Yeah, they're actually really some of the most downloaded episodes. I think everybody was like, wow, we got to get ready for the next year, Well, Stefan, if people are listening and they're like, wow, Stefan's amazing, I want to have him come speak at my event, or whoa, I didn't understand that about wealth management. I thought I had to have a certain net worth. I think I need to speak with someone because I want to do something more. What are the best ways for people to connect with you?
Sure. Best way is really, I'm very easy to find on Google. As long as you spell my name right, most people don't. So my name is Stefan, Stefan, and the last name is Contorno. For anybody who just Googles my name, they'll find me. My work email address is stefan.contorno@ubs.com. But again, I'm on most social media. I'm pretty easy to find.
Yes. So head over to LinkedIn, make sure you connect up because your posts are fantastic.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Stefan. I really appreciate this amazing, seriously, such a fun conversation. Might be one of my favorites.
Oh, I like to hear that.
I'm going to say it. I used to not say things like that because I'm like, well, I don't know that that's fair to everybody else, but I'm going to say, I think this might be one of my favorite conversations.
I love it. Well, thank you. I enjoyed this very much. I really, really appreciate you having me.
You bet. To all my awesome listeners, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. Make sure that you rate and review this so that we know what you gained from this, something, gem that's going to help you level up your life. And until next time, live big, love bigger, and go find your freedom. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode of Ask Me How I Know. This episode was brought to you by 3 Keys Investments. They are dedicated to helping people like you, you, my awesome listeners, develop passive income and legacy wealth through multifamily investing. Feel free to check out their website, 3keysinvestments.com, to see if there is an offering that will help your portfolio grow and meet all of your needs. If you haven't already rated, reviewed, subscribed, liked, all of those bells and whistles, I would be absolutely honored if you would do that for Ask Me How I Know. Thanks again, and go make it a great day.